I was in the Peace Corps. I care about people. I want people to thrive. That's why I believe in the libertarian philosophy. I would, by the way, also put in a safety net. We talked about that in the first program. Again, it's Milton Friedman, below which people should not be allowed to fall, and getting a certain amount of money in a stipend each month, but you would lose 50 cents of your dollar, of each dollar you earned from the stipend. So therefore you have an incentive to earn the extra money. Incentives matter. Do I need to say that again? Sorry to be so bold, but incentives matter. If you want to put incentives in favor of someone doing something, that will happen. Milton Friedman, you get more of what you subsidize and less of what you tax. You get more of what you subsidize and less of what you tax. And today, what are we subsidizing? Laziness, victimization, welfare. We are in effect, literally paying young mothers, unmarried mothers, to have more children. We are making it financially punitive if, in fact, the father of the child lives in the family. The father, if he lives by himself, will make more money on welfare, and the mother with the children will make more money on welfare than they would if they lived together. They get punished. Message: you get more of what you subsidize, less of what you tax. So particularly, well, all over throughout our country, we have more single mothers than we've ever had before, particularly in the African-American community. Thomas Sowell, wonderful man. He spells his name S-O-W-E-L-L, but in a lot of ways, it could and should be spelled S-O-U-L. African-American economics professor, really been around. And he was saying that, look, he's done the study, he's done the research, and he found that before the war on poverty, 1965, it began with Lyndon Johnson. Before the war on poverty, the amount of single unwed mothers in the Black community was somewhere around 10%. Now it's almost 65 to 70% because they get paid. And the poverty level in 1965 among African Americans in our country was far lower than it is today. But the government keeps stepping in and interfering. So these are things that we just need to look at, and we have not done that. By the way, Thomas Jefferson, and also a libertarian, I've mentioned him several times in this show. My classic comment of that is, I don't care if you worship one God, 20 gods, or no God, it doesn't pick my pocket and it doesn't break my leg. In other words, just live and let live. But he also said, quote, most bad government has grown out of too much government. Most bad government has grown out of too much government. And you have these government agencies. We have some that are still in operation that were begun in the New Deal, for heaven's sake. Hey, do you think the circumstances are different today in the 2020s than they were in the 1932s, 1935s? You know, but we have to have sunset provisions. Libertarians would do this to have each agency come to Congress every, 5 years, whatever, 6 years, individually, and say what they have done for the last 6 years. What they have spent, what their goals were, what our goals are for next year and for the following year, and how much we expect to spend. And we can see whether that's necessary or not. It's called an audit. And that's what the free market would do. Companies do that all the time, but the government does not, because it has no incentive to save money. You've heard of a fellow by the name of Elon Musk, who is an amazing guy. He has SpaceX. By the way, I was involved as a discovery referee on a trade secrets case between Broadcom and SpaceX. And one of the provisions was that they had to define what the trade secrets were. And they went back and forth on that for a while. And finally, they came out with it. I looked at it and said, boy, your secret is safe with me. I don't understand any of this. But the reason I'm bringing this up now, you've probably seen it in the papers, that SpaceX was recently able to send our astronauts up to the space station and return them safely for 1/10 of the cost that NASA did it last time. 1/10. Why? Well, first of all, the first booster, phenomenal decision. Phenomenal. The first booster that would break off and stuff used to, under NASA, go into the ocean and be destroyed and lost. But with SpaceX, since they were on an economic basis, on an incentive basis, they designed it so that it would re-enter, actually come back face down on or face up on a barge at sea, so they could reclaim it. Saves huge amounts of money. And I read a comment by one of the engineers from NASA. He's saying, well, I suggested something like this before to the contractors. The contractor said, oh, no, we don't want that to happen because we're on a price plus contract. So it depends on the price. We would get 10% of the gross of the amount of the contract. So the higher the amount of the contract, the bigger our profits. They had an incentive to have it spent more money because it's government. No companies do that. No companies do that at all. So these are the things that we just need to look at. Classic liberals talk and preach a good game. You know, minimum wage we talked about. Rent control, same deal, where you restrict the number of apartment units available, condo units available. What happens? Well, we all know that if you restrict the number available, then the price goes up. That's what's happened everywhere they put rent control in there. But you have government, for political reasons, catering to these poor people. Oh, your rent is too high. Oh, that sort of thing. I was the chair of the World Affairs Council of Orange County here back in February, March, when the COVID virus started coming in. And we saw our lease was due, and we, of course, in the Orange County World Affairs Council, make our money by putting on events. We bring in speakers about world policy. We were closed down. We couldn't put on any events. We're making no money. So I called the landlord and said, look, this is what's happened. We're not making any money. We do not want to move out, but we'd have to store our furniture. We wouldn't have a place of operations for our director to come in, etc. But we're not going to be able to afford this. So instead of paying you, let's say for the next 8 months, instead of paying you the rent that we've been paying you of $2,308 a month, we'll only pay you $1,000 for 8 months. Then we will look at what's going on and renegotiate. The landlord's thinking, well, let's see. About 40% of something is a lot better than 100% of nothing. So they said, sure. So we stayed and we paid them. They shared the pain with us. You have government stepping in, entitlements stepping in. Oh, poor babies. Oh, these poor tenants. No. So you've deprived those tenants and the landlords of reaching an agreement. Landlords do not want to lose good tenants. Landlords understand that the tenants eventually will get their jobs back, or if I evict them, it'll be empty. So maybe we can work these things out. The government has caused these problems. The private sector can work these things out much more flexibly. So they talk a good game, but they don't want to really have people get better. When it comes down to it, this is a terrible thing to say, but from my standpoint, liberals, Democrats do not want people to progress because then they won't vote for Democrats anymore. They'll get off better. And Republicans actually don't want you to get better either, because then you'll improve yourself and you'll start competing with me. I'm successful. I don't want all of these other competitions. So they put in requirements with regard to having licensing and that sort of thing. No, libertarians say, okay, wait a minute. Licensing is overdone. I actually think that even as an attorney, I shouldn't have the state license me. I should be bonded. I should have insurance. I should learn something. But the insurance company, before they bond me, will make sure that at least I know something as to what I'm doing. That will be a private, in effect, permit, private license, but much more respected with regard to the economy and free enterprise system and competition. Competition would work. But they use licenses in order to shield them, your friends, we shield them from competition. That's the difference in libertarian approach, free market approach. But I can tell you also, I am not a no holds barred, unbridled capitalist. I was at UCLA and I was a United States history major, and this stayed with me for life because the thesis that I wrote in my junior year for my history, in order to graduate in history, was about the 1934 general strike, longshoreman strike in San Francisco. Harry Bridges, by the way. And boy, I tell you, the shipping agencies really took advantage of the longshoremen. At the beginning, each morning, they would come in and say, well, this is a 75-pound bundle. I will pay you 20 cents or 15 cents to carry it on board. Will anyone do it for 14? Anyone do it for 12? And they just bargain them down. And then they make them run back and forth. And there was no workers' comp insurance and no safety in the workplace. I believe in safety in the workplace. I believe in having child labor laws. I believe in anti-monopoly laws as well. So not unbridled capitalism. Where does this fit in? It's a hard one. But the idea now that we're talking about the government is intruding supposedly into corporations. Oh, you're going to have a certain number of women on your board of directors or in your major offices or minorities or whatever. It just doesn't work. It's arbitrary by its nature. People, I would tell people, in fact, I recently bought a Ford. I had an Acura before that, and I bought a Ford because I decided, I would like to buy an American car. By the way, when I took delivery of the Ford, I said, well, where is this car made? And he said, oh, Mexico. But okay, life is complicated and it's all multifaceted. But these are things that we do. No one speaks for the Libertarian Party. I understand that. No one speaks for any political party. I'm just one person. By the way, though, I would ask that after you've been reading iPencil, which is really an instructive essay, go to my website. It's judgejimgray.com and click on articles. And I've written something I call One Man's Libertarian White Paper. And it talks about who the winners would be in a libertarian society and the losers. And it also gives various examples of what libertarian thought is. So we would let you live by your rules. Unfortunately, all other political parties in our country, from my standpoint, and correct me if I'm wrong, and Michael, I don't know if we're getting many questions or not, but all other political parties, first of all, want to profit by being involved in government. Libertarians do not. And all other political parties want to set the rules. Oh, you'll back by my rules. You'll set by not by his rules, by mine. And our situation is different. I think you would all agree that we want you to set your own rules, as long as those rules don't wrongly harm me or take my stuff. As we say, don't hurt me, don't hurt other people or take their stuff. Back to Thomas Jefferson, doesn't pick my pocket, it doesn't break my leg. Those are things that make a major difference between any other party and us libertarians. So we are the only mainstream party, I believe, in the United States of America today, and talk to people about it. Go to my website, judgejimgray.com, look at One Man's Libertarian White Paper. There's so many others. Free to Choose, which is a Bible by Milton Friedman, von Mises. But it comes down to simply what does work. So,
if you want, there's 12 questions at the moment.
12 questions. Okay, I was just about to get to my safety net, so let's ask a couple of questions. How are we doing?
All right. So from George Reis, how many people have been put out of jobs due to minimum wage? Entry-level jobs used to be places where high school kids got work experience and a sense of work ethic. Hasn't that been virtually eliminated with the increases in minimum wage?
George, I don't have the numbers, but the answer categorically is yes. That if you are an employer and you have to pay somebody $15 an hour, think McDonald's. You used to go to McDonald's and you'd look at a cashier and you'd say, I'd like 2 Big Macs and a set of fries. Today, when you go there, you're going to put it into a computer, aren't you? Because it's too expensive it just doesn't pencil out. As a result, it doesn't pencil out. As a result, people lose their jobs or they won't hire more people. So the answer categorically is yes. And I would suggest to all of you, it's far more beneficial for society to have 100 people working, for example, at $10 an hour than 65 people working at $15 an hour. I don't think anybody could question that. And then once you learn a work ethic, once you show you're worth more money, you'll either get it at that company or you'll have work experience, work ethics, and you'll find some other company. You will progress. But the answer is those are killers with regard to getting people a job.
All right. From Howard Hinman, it's a 2-part question. Is the major issue economic ignorance, and how can the public be educated on economics?
Howard, the answer is yes. I don't think a person can really be educated unless they understand simple supply and demand. The price system, Adam Smith, the price system just makes a huge difference. And people just don't get it. They just don't understand that incentives matter, all the rest. But once you start talking about this, what do they call economics? The dull science, something like that, but they're just wrong. You need to understand supply and demand, and incentives matter. So it's a matter of education. Well, isn't everything? I don't know what to do, but I do believe today in our universities and our high schools that we are teaching socialism. We are teaching, oh, poor baby. We're teaching victimization. And I will go along as to say, I've said this before, I'll say it again, that if I were bleeding on the street, right here, right beneath your feet, you would have no legal obligation to help me unless you caused my injuries. That would be different, but no legal obligation whatsoever. But we will because we want to, because we're compassionate people. But I'm not entitled. Howard, just because I'm alive does not mean you owe me anything. And you've got to get away from that victimization. We can talk about victimization pretty soon, but the answer is yes. It's a question of education. It's a question of showing people I care about you, so I want to abolish the minimum wage law. I care about you, so I want to give you a healthcare voucher, abolish or change Obamacare into a system of health savings accounts and vouchers so that you can compete on the free market and be able to get the health care that you need on a sliding scale. So that's where we've fallen down. We need to bring competition back because we care about you. Because again, asking this question, have you ever seen any area in which you've gotten the government to interfere in the marketplace, prices went way up and quality of goods and services went way down? It's a question of economics. It's not an egghead science. It's really mandates. It's always a part of decisions that people make. It doesn't always control, but it's always a part of them, and people just don't get it.
All right, from Charles McGlon, what does the free market say about illegal immigration?
Well, I don't know what the free market says about illegal immigration. I believe that I was so fortunate to have been born in this country, and others have come here to pursue the American dream. They don't come to steal. They don't come for welfare. They come to have a better life for themselves and their children. Bless them, and it's made us a much stronger country. But as long as we have a welfare state, like we were talking about this before, just because they're alive doesn't mean I owe them anything. As long as we have a welfare state, we should have control of our borders. I think that's pretty straightforward. Larry Sharp, what a wonderful man, Mr. Libertarian. He agreed to be my running mate when I was seeking the nomination for president. Had a wonderful approach to this. In fact, I have my own podcast. It's called JudgeJimGray.com. It's on every Friday morning at 7 o'clock Pacific on www.voiceamerica.com on the Variety channel. And he was talking about it just fairly recently, 2 Ellis Islands. And let me go into it because it really shows the difference between the free enterprise system and government. So you have 2 Ellis Islands placed somewhere along the Mexican border, maybe one in Texas, one in California, each done privately, but by 2 separate companies. And they're entitled to, in effect, provide a work visa, an orange card. You come to them, they will screen you. They will see if you have any medical problems, any criminal justice problems, terrorist sympathies, that sort of thing. And if you show that you're anxious to work, and you can, they will give you an orange card. And you'll pay a certain amount of money for it. And then you have to come back after 2 years and check in with them. But now you can use that orange card, that work visa, anywhere in the country, at least any state that will agree to do this, and you will get a job. You'll show that card, and then the company, who's now paying lots of money below board for workers and farm workers and people in restaurants and hotels, they will in effect give a commission to one of those 2 Ellis Islands so that they will be able to fund themselves without involvement from the government. Great idea. So people come in and they do that. Also, people, we have what, I don't know, 10, 14 million people here that are undocumented right now that are working or here. Some of them are good people, most of them. Some of them are really bad apples. But when they start seeing that these people are here, and if something goes wrong, they can call the police. And if their job, their employer takes advantage of them, they can call them on it because they're here legally. They can get a driver's license. They can get car insurance. They can live a normal life. No welfare attached, by the way. So other people that are already here saying, well, gee, that's pretty good. I'm going to go to the Ellis Island as well. I want to get legitimate. And then you have some rogues out there. You have Carlos or whatever who's selling drugs and beating people up. They can't turn Carlos in now because they're fearful that they'll be deported. So they keep quiet. So Carlos approaches them and takes advantage of them. But now that I'm here legally, hey, the police come in and say, well, you've got some guy selling. Yeah, it's Carlos. He's right over there. So this would work. And pretty soon you'll actually run the Immigration Naturalization Service out of business because most people are going to get value for coming into those Ellis Islands. It's a long-winded explanation. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but not really, Charles. And that is the private sector. I think that as long as we have a welfare state here, that we should keep control of our borders, we should know who's here, and it should be up to us as to whether they're here and how long they stay. But having said that, legal immigration, people come here to work, and it's really helped our country, and I welcome them.
All right.
Go ahead.
From George Reis. He says, I love your filtration system at Grace Hardware example. Seems like it could have applied prior to 1994 when indoor smoking was banned. But the other side of that argument is that the smoking ban has reduced smoking, increased health, and reduced healthcare costs, etc. So how does the libertarian solution address the health issue in this example?
Sure. George, the best approach to mind-altering, sometimes addicting substances, pretty much in my lifetime, has been the way we've handled cigarettes. Not by making it illegal, then you'll just bring Al Capone into the cigarette distribution business and make my wonderful mother, who died of lung cancer and was addicted to cigarettes, make her a criminal because she would have been hard to leave. What you do is you educate people. You put information out there. We have reduced cigarette smoking, what, by 50% in our country in the last 10 years? Not by making it illegal, but we have, mores. You can't smoke in your office building, in elevators, have to be outside in designated places. We take control of it, not by making it illegal again, but by taking control. And it's worked quite well. We should do the same thing with regard to marijuana or various other drugs as well. Hold people accountable for their actions. I believe, oh my goodness, George, I don't know your age. I know I'm older than you are, but remember when we would go on airplanes and okay, they had smoking sections in the airplane. So the last, 15 rows of the airplane, you could smoke as if there'd be a barrier to keep that damn smoke from coming up in front. It was awful. But now that we have regulations and controls, as well as mores and the rest, we're doing far better. And that's where we should go. We've not made cigarettes illegal, of course, except for young people, which I actually support. But at any rate, that's the far better approach.
All right. From Howard Hinman. I know of a gentleman whose son wanted to get married, presumably to a lady. This was in Northern California, and they actually were able to find a church that with appropriate social distancing, etc. The wedding has not happened because no bureaucrats would sign off on that in that county. Any comments?
Yes, Howard. It's arbitrary. Just like with my hardware store, I would allow your religious institution, your place of worship, to issue their own regulations. No one will come in without a mask. If everybody will be socially distanced, unless you're walking with your wife or your children, you'll be 6 feet away from others. We're going to open the windows. We're going to be outside. You'll be able to go to your place of worship. They make the decision, and then you as the parishioner, the customer, in effect, decide whether you go or not. That works. And of course, then you get away from this First Amendment issue, which I think is rather substantial about restricting religious freedom and the rest. But it's the same example as my hardware store, almost exactly the same. I don't want to get sick. I still do not. Some restaurants in Orange County have opened up inside. I don't go. I go outside. I will sit outside or on a veranda with windows open. That's me. I'm 75 years old. I'm not going to go so far, take my wife into a restaurant inside a closed area. I'm just not going to do it. But that should be my decision. Same thing with regard to the wedding.
All righty. Howard Hinman, is the current welfare AFDC program the worst thing that has ever happened to the Black community?
The answer, Howard, well, I mean, the worst thing, lynching wasn't wonderful. Slavery wasn't, but it's the worst thing in my lifetime that has happened to anybody. I would allow, again, let me go into my safety net, because I believe, not because we have to, but because we want to, I would put in a safety net. For example, if you earn no money, you're 18 years of age or older, you're here legally or with the green card, and you earn no money, I would have the federal government give you a stipend of $15,000 a year, broken into 12 monthly payments of what, $1,250, no questions asked. By the way, people are going to say, oh, if you're drug addicted, you're going to spend it on alcohol or drugs. If you have a drug problem, that's a local issue. You have the locals give you drug treatment. If you're going to gamble it away, you need a conservatorship, you're mentally ill, that's a different issue. But do away then with all other welfare. So again, you have an incentive to earn the extra dollar. So anywhere between $0 and $30,000, for every dollar that you make, you will give up 50 cents of your stipend. Do away then with all of this other welfare. So you do away with, for example, my daughter is bipolar, and I tried to get her a job. I actually told the nonprofit that if you give her a job and pay her $12 an hour, I will pay you $15 an hour. And we quickly found out that if she were to work more than 10 hours a week, she would lose more in her benefits from Social Security than she would earn by working. That's nuts. They have an incentive not to work. Stupid. Under this system, Milton Friedman's, by the way, is free to choose, is right at my elbow. But under this system, everybody always has an incentive to earn the extra dollar. The welfare system has been a trap for many people, African Americans, just like we were saying, and then they get into entitlements. Let me talk about entitlements, victimization, because, reparations. Reparations indeed. I mean, Thomas Sowell also said, or maybe it was Walter Williams, that why should I pay you for something that happened before my lifetime? Didn't happen to you. It didn't happen. I didn't do it. I wasn't alive. So I owe you something for that. And if you get into reparations, then you can never pay people enough. They can always be victims. They can always be deserving of more. It will never end. And by the way, okay, are you going to trace it back to descendants of slaves? Well, okay, what if somebody was a slave for about an hour and a half and then slavery passed and he or she married somebody else who was never a slave? So your great-great-grandfather, the only person in your lineage that was a slave for 3 weeks. Is that person going to get the same sort of reparations as somebody that came over here from Jamaica that was never a slave or came over? It just doesn't work. It's a trap. It doesn't work. Victimization doesn't work. Poor baby doesn't work. Henry Ford, not my favorite person in the world. I've mentioned his name several times on this show. He was probably anti-Semitic, but he said something that everybody should understand, Howard and everyone else. Anyone that feels they can thrive by relying on the government should talk to the American Indian. It's all you have to say. It's a trap. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, had I won the presidency, that would have been a shining light on there for, look, when the Irish came over here, the stereotype was, oh, they get drunk, they drink all of this alcohol. So we should have had a Bureau of Irish Affairs. Don't you agree, Howard? I mean, they couldn't do this themselves. So hogwash. The Irish have done very well, thank you very much, by making them be responsible for their own actions. Same thing with regard to the Native Americans. By the way, the Native Americans call the Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA. They call it bossing Indians around. It should be abolished. Do away with it. Let the Native Americans choose how to educate their own children. And on the reservations, you cannot even own your property. No, you can't. You've been through Native American Indian reservations, haven't you? They're all drab. They all look like they were out of a Sears catalog from 1957. They have no incentives to fix it up because they don't own it. And by the way, if you want to start your own little hardware store, your own little business, you can't get the seed money. You can't mortgage your house to get seed money because you don't own it. It's all the government intrusion. Let people own their own homes, live their own lives. I'd put in that safety net and otherwise get the government out of the way. We had a saying with regard to my campaign. It didn't work, okay, but we're going to get the government out of your wallet, out of your business, and out of your way. That's what we should do. We do need government. We do need government, Article 1, Section 8. We do need a military, and it's expensive, by the way. We do need a judiciary. We do need to have, a system. You can debate whether we're going to have private roads or public roads, and the answer is both. But one way or the other, less government. Thank you, Thomas Jefferson. Most bad government comes from too much government. How long has it been since we have pared down the size of government? Because big government, say what you will, is really, really good and effective at one thing. I will give them this. They're always being able to get more power, more cost, and more intrusion. They always keep getting bigger in that regard. No, libertarians will pare that down for the benefit of everyone except the bureaucrats. So these are things that we need to look at. You know, again, the welfare system has been a trap. It just hasn't worked. If it did, I'd be in favor of it. If socialism worked, I'd be in favor of it. I'm not philosophically pure, but here, philosophy and practicality and results come together in the same thing, and it's basically libertarianism. How are we doing for more questions, George?
I have more for you.
Okay.
From David Pratt Demarest. Protection and adjudication are used as the primary justification for government. How about free market protection and adjudication?
I'm sorry, will you read it to me again, please, George?
Sure, it's Mike actually, but protection and adjudication are used as the primary justifications for government. How about free market protection and adjudication?
I'm afraid of, well, I'm speaking against my own economic self-interest, Michael, because I'm now a judge and I want to have a private adjudication tomorrow. So they come to me, but if you have only a private adjudication system, it will pretty soon come out that only the wealthy get justice. No, I think that justice system should be based upon the public. It should be a public sector that is neutral and that is doesn't owe allegiance to the person that's going to be paying their salary. So that is, I think, a justification for that. I think that the military as well. It's expensive to fly, to purchase airplanes. F-18s and the rest are expensive. To rely upon voluntary contributions for that. And by the way, it's pretty expensive to train pilots and to keep them. So these are things that we also need. We do need government for some of these things. It says in Article 1, Section 8 that we need government for the mail system. I think that's been overcome by FedEx and UPS and the rest of this. By the way, Michael, had you heard that FedEx and UPS are thinking about merging? Had you heard that?
Yes.
Okay, well, and the name of the new company, don't steal my line, Michael. The name of the new company is going to be Fed Up. Did you hear that too?
No, that's a good one.
All right. At any rate, otherwise that's the only. But at any rate, no, I think that there is a place for the public sector, and the judiciary is high on my list. I think that's really essential. And then it costs money.
Okay. From David Pratt Demarest. Electioneering cronyism has eroded our freedoms and produced Big Brother. We don't have to elect cronyism-prone representatives in the free market. Is tyranny of the majority the problem and free markets the solution?
David, you heard it here first. Life is complicated. I agree with the premise. I agree with your question. Cronyism, yes. Let me go back to Thomas Jefferson, who said that after the passage of the Constitution, which he really did not favor, but he said, we're going to need a bloody revolution every generation to keep the vested interests at bay. Now, fortunately, I think that the Constitution keeps that revolution from having to be bloody. But look how long it's been since we've had a political revolution in our country. Since the late 1850s, the Whigs lost out to the Republicans. Look at the vested interests since that time. And it's staggering. It's overwhelming. It's government. It's the Republicans and the Democrats. By the way, yes, they're having the presidential debates today. I think that we took away some of their viewership, but they took away some of ours as well. But no, they have the vested interest. The Commission on Presidential Debates, so-called, is entirely made up of Republicans and Democrats, and they are determined not to have a third voice there. Dr. Joe Jorgensen, with a libertarian candidate for president, were on the ballots in all 50 states. It is, I don't use this word very often, un-American not to have the libertarian voice heard in today's presidential debates. But it's cronyism, and it's a terrible thing. You've got to prune it back. You have to have institutions that keep these things more under control. Ronald Reagan said that the closest thing to eternal life in this world is a government program, a government agency. He's right. I haven't remembered They've changed names and combined a few agencies, but not in my lifetime have we actually abolished a federal agency, or even in California that I'm aware of. No, we should do that. The vested interests have taken over, and it's only the libertarians to be the only game in town. I'm proud of who we are. We should get those words out a lot more.
Can you tell us why a vote, and this is from George, can you tell us why a vote for libertarian candidates is not a wasted vote?
Certainly. What trite phrase do you want? We use that, okay, if you vote for the lesser of two evils, you still get evil. But I say, as a practical matter, if you're a citizen of California, a vote for the Republican candidate is a wasted vote. That, in this case, Biden is going to win California no matter what happens. Also, and I've written about this and I've talked about this, vote for someone. Feel good about your vote. Vote in favor of someone instead of against one so that the lesser of two evils doesn't win. But, when I was running for vice president, we were polling in Ohio, I think it was, 2 weeks before the election, we were polling at 15%. We were polling at 15%. But when the election came, this was a swing state. This was, oh my goodness, are you going to go with Obama or with Romney? And so when it came down to it, I think we won like 6% of the vote because of the lost vote syndrome. It's a tough one, but the answer is to the presidential debates. By the way, you've heard it here first probably. There is an important movement coming up right now. We have a venue for a fifth presidential debate. It's being offered. We have a moderator that's well known in media circles, and we're trying to met this publicly, trying to shame the Republican and Democratic candidates into having a debate with Joe Jorgensen in this venue. It will be telecast, and we're trying to solicit money for this. It's costing me some money, writing articles in the newspapers, etc., to shame them, because I've had Mr. Republican, so-called, in Orange County and Mr. Democrat in Orange County back in 2012 look me in the eye at separate times and say, Jim, I'm not going to vote for you, but you should be in those debates. It's anti-American. It's not what we stand for, but it's cronyism. It's actually controlled by the Republicans and Democrats. It's cronyism, just like all of the rest of this. We need that political revolution. Once again, we're the only game in town. Bring it back to the free enterprise system and away from the cronyism and the victimization, which doesn't work.
All righty. From Howard Hinman. Why was Jimmy Carter, his administration, and Congress able to put through substantial reform, e.g. abolishment of the Civil Aeronautics Board?
That's right. They did abolish the Civil Aeronautics Board. And wasn't it Reagan that brought in more competition in the airline industries? The CAB, actually, and I will sit corrected on that one, Howard, because the CAB used to set rates. And of course, the airlines loved it, because there wouldn't be competition because you'd have to pay the same on whatever airline you went into. So they didn't want to be competitive. Once they became competitive, you had people like Southwest Airlines coming in, undercutting it and bringing in competition. So that was a good thing. If Jimmy Carter's administration did that, I'll take my hat off to them. They also, by the way, put in the Department of Education, and education has only taken a nosedive ever since. So that far outweighs the abolishment of the CAB. But okay, you're right. I think that was abolished, and it was a good thing. You brought in competition to the airline industry. Hooray!
All right. From Charles McGlon. What part of the free market authorizes social services?
What part of the free market? None that I can think of. Free for social, well, the free market provides social services all over the place. You can go to private counseling, you can get police, you can get fire, but it's a blend. I think that I was involved with juvenile court for a while, and we had social services, we had those sorts of things. I think that's important. I would continue with that. But having said that, I would, if I could, abolish FEMA, for example, and contract with Red Cross anytime that there was a emergency situation. Instead of having FEMA go in and do it with just it just makes a mess of everything, allow various private organizations to be on contract with the government to address those. And on that subject, I bring up, well, think mosquito nets. Now people say, oh, what's he talking about now? But mosquito nets, it's clear that there are some places still in the world that have malaria, mostly in Africa, but elsewhere as well. And it's also shown by statistics, for every 10 mosquito nets you get on the ground so that people can use them when they're asleep and stay away from the mosquitoes, you're going to keep at least 15% of those people from getting malaria, of whom maybe a third will lose their lives. So it's the same mosquito net, but a private foundation puts that on the ground for something like $10.50, and a public organization, the government, it costs them like 3 times as much. It costs them about $30 to $35 for the same mosquito net, because they don't have those incentives. You have private organizations. I'm proud of them. Oxfam, for example, Heifer International. They go in around the world. They're voluntary, and they will donate in poverty areas a herd of goats or a few goats or some chickens, flocks of chickens or something like that. And they also teach animal husbandry on the low level, that low economic level, frequently, of course, to women who are frequently more responsible than men in these economic areas. They teach them animal husbandry. They also teach them banking so that, they can perpetuate the industry where now they can start milking the goats for their families. And then, yes, they can slaughter a few goats, but they'll have more goats, they'll get larger, they'll start selling the goat milk in their village. And then pretty soon they're also required to give other goats to elsewhere. It's working famously well. Mini loans working famously well, as opposed to government. Our government goes in and gives huge amounts of money to the governments in those countries, which results basically in those officials driving around in Mercedes automobiles and opening up Swiss bank accounts. There's no accountability. The private sector has accountability. Doctors Without Borders, fabulous organization, does far better when you have emergency situations. They go in quickly, they take their equipment, they send in doctors, they send in counselors, they train the locals. It's private. So if you're going to do things like that, I think the government should, I think they should do it by contract with these various organizations. And if one starts doing it better than another, competition will result in a lot better situations. So that's social services. That's kind of where we would be. We're a little bit running out of time. I will also say probably my favorite foundation is the Nature Conservancy, that is wonderful in conserving our resources. They're going into various barrier reefs and working with regard to the coral and teaching fishermen not to overfish, showing them how it's worth their while not to fish in such and such an area so that it will rebound. Private sector works. Victimization, government intrusion doesn't. End of discussion. We need the libertarian approach. We need people to understand that we are not survival of the fittest. We are not people that believe in I made it, so to hell with you. No, we're caring people, but adopt programs that work. Thank you, Milton Friedman. Let's judge our programs by the results, not their good intentions. Let me ask you, Michael, one question. You've asked me a few. Did you hear recently that the police were called to a child care center where a 6-year-old boy was found to be resisting arrest?
No, I did not hear that.
Well, he's going to have to take his rest breaks more often or the police will be called again. He was resisting arrest. Okay, there you go. At any rate, that's the best I can. Thank you, folks. Thank you for listening. Tell your friends. I don't have all the answers. I prove that pretty much every time that I talk. In fact, when I start talking, sometimes they send the sirens after me. But, it's good and important things to discuss these issues. We were involved when we were running for the nomination for president in what we called AMAs, Ask Me Anything. And we should be able to discuss anything. Today, we have almost a prohibition on discussion. If you don't agree with me, you're not only terrible, you're evil, and you should lose your job after you apologize. We're getting into mob rule. Libertarians don't do that. We don't believe in that. We believe in open, honest discussion and responsibility of all things. Responsibility for your actions, responsibility for what you do, and accountability. And that's why we work. That's why what we do is successful. I came away from the Republican Party with the passage of the so-called Patriot Act back in 2001. I could not be involved with any group that would assist, much less condone, this direct attack, fundamental attack on our civil liberties. I've actually written a musical recently, and in fact, we're going to put on a couple of podcasts with regard to it. It's on the Constitutional Convention. And I learned that there were 55 delegates that actually came to the U.S. Constitutional Convention in 1787, and they fought, they bickered, they debated about virtually everything. The thing that each delegate agreed, the most important function of government is protecting our liberties from the encroachment of government. Protecting our liberties from the encroachment of government. And I think our founders would be very upset with us as to how we have allowed our liberties to be squandered and encroached upon by government. The second most important was keeping us safe, which of course is also important. By the way, David, I find your question to have been the most provocative and insightful. So if you would provide your address to Michael, I will send you a book. Just tell us which book you want. 2 Paragraphs for Liberty or A Voter's Handbook. Happy to endorse it and send it out to you. So once again, David, Michael, George, thank you for hosting this. Good luck to all the libertarians around the country in this coming election. Support the cause because it's worth it. And I'll finish by saying thank you again, and life is good. Why do I say that? Because it is.
All right, George has something he wants to say.
George, you're muted.
George, you're muted.
I think George is sounding pretty eloquent, don't you, Michael?
Yeah, it's fair.
There you go.
How's that? Is that better?
There we go.
So thank you, Jim, first of all, for presenting these 5 weeks of excellent information to our group. I greatly appreciate it. And I think that everyone who's attended has benefited greatly from your insights. So thank you again.
My pleasure.
For those of you who are interested in the Libertarian Party and don't know where to go, please visit lpoc.org. lpoc.org. You can get more information about the Libertarian Party of Orange County, as well as the Libertarian Party of California, as well as Libertarian Views in general. For those of you who are not registered as a Libertarian, please do so. When we have more registered Libertarians, we send an incredible message to the Republicans and the Democrats. We let them know that we are not happy with what they are doing. We let them know that we want an alternative. We let them know that the alternative is not just something, but it's a specific thing, which is less government and more liberty. So please, if you are not registered Libertarian, change your registration to Libertarian. It sends a huge message. Also visit Jim Gray's website, judgejimgray.com. He has great information on that site. And so that's a great place to get some good information. The Huntington Beach Libertarian Club is also a resource for a lot of information. We actually don't do much posting on our Facebook page, but we plan to continue doing various presentations in the future. And so you can go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/HB Liberty Club. And if you visit that website, as we post additional sessions, those will become available to you. So thank you all for participating in this. Please register as a Libertarian if you're not already, and if you agree with our views. Please consider joining our organization, lpoc.org/join. We'll give you information about joining the party. That provides us with the resources we need to help put out our information to others. And there's nothing more important right now. We are in a situation in which we have no choice. Libertarian views are the only choice that absolutely makes sense. So please help us out with that and join our party. Register as Libertarian. Go to Judge Gray's website in order to get more information there. Go to our Facebook page in order to get information about future events that we will be having, and go to lpoc.org in order to get more information about the Libertarian Party of Orange County. Thank you all for participating. Thank you again, Jim, for presenting this great information over the last 5 weeks. Thank you, Mike and Torya, for being wonderful technical service support for us. And thank you, David Naranjo, as the chair of the Libertarian Party of Orange County, for supporting this. All right, that's it.